Think about, and then tell me, one facet, one characteristic, one event, one anything about Frank Sinatra that somehow intrigues you or sticks out the most or makes the best impression to you or makes the worst impression to you. He lived a very long life. His life was well documented. Newspapers, books, TV, movies, the whole kit and caboodle, as they say. The name is Tony, although legally Anthony Proachini, born in Fairfield, Connecticut. He worked in Manhattan for over 20 years and, flip-flopped between both places for a long time, but I spend most of my time in Fairfield now. And my career pursuits have been music, banking, and interpreting. The moment that I started to become enamored with him and his life and all the facets of his life occurred when a very, very good performer born and raised in Bridgeport named Benny Ray lent me one of the mid-1950s Capitol long-playing records. It has the title A Swingin' Affair. And even the very first cut on that album, which is called The Lonesome Road, had a certain rhythm, tempo, beat.
Look down, the lonesome road.
They called it the rhythm of the heartbeat, and they do call many of Sinatra's Capitol albums from the 1950s the first of the concept albums, which meant one general type of tone for the entire album, or a possible theme about love or lost love or whatever throughout the entire album. I became fascinated with the Nelson Riddle arrangement on the album with Frank singing and how they juxtaposed each other. So I started copying those arrangements on the piano when I played jobs with Benny and kept buying more and more Sinatra albums. At Caldor's in Fairfield at the time, they sold Capitol reissues for either $1.99 or $2.99. I don't remember the price exactly anymore, but it's very low. So I was really getting a bargain, and I was starting to learn about many of the great songs of the so-called Great American Songbook. I was hooked completely. Started seeing Sinatra movies on TV, reading books about him, and I did see him perform live. He died in 1998 at the age of 83, Francis Albert Sinatra. People who have seen him will have seen him during the concert years, the 1980s and 90s, and possibly before. But prior to that, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, he's more at much smaller venues, clubs in New York City. Of course, the Las Vegas years with the Rat Pack, that's kind of like a concert setting. But then again, there's a lot of comedy thrown in, and he's palling around with other performers. Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and whoever else was in the Rat Pack on a given night. There was an important moment in his life in 1945. He was one of the actors in a short movie entitled The House I Live In. For his part in that movie, for talking against prejudice, he was awarded a special Oscar. He very strongly supported black people that he knew, in particular Sammy Davis Jr. and Nat King Cole. Sammy was told that he had to go to a different hotel, let's say. Frank wouldn't have it, and he put his money where his mouth is. From Here to Eternity, a huge blockbuster, came out in 1953. You certainly know some of the other actors that are in that movie. The cast was huge. Donna Reed, Deborah Carr, Burt Lancaster, Montgomery Clift, Ernest Borgnine, and I think it's either George Reeve or George Reeves, the man who would become famous for Superman on TV some years later. And his part was of a scrappy little, I guess he was a private or something like that in the Army. Many believe that his role there was perfect and that it was very similar to the person he was, even growing up. He even said when he read this script, this is perfect for me. And he took a very small fee for the movie because he thought he was perfect for it. And he was right. So he won for Best Supporting Actor, The House I Live in which he spoke fervently against prejudice and racism. That's a honorary award, okay? So it's not really for the acting per se. And in 1970, he was awarded with the Jean Hirschholt Humanitarian Award. It still is an Oscar. So he won 3, I call them 2 special Oscars, non-acting Oscars, and 1 for his acting. He was nominated for The Man with the Golden Arm, directed by Otto Preminger, but he did not win. A drama role, as they say, was The Manchurian Candidate in 1962. I suggest watching all 3 of those great drama movies. 1943, RKO, Higher and Higher. Charming little film, some very good songs, some elegant ballroom scenes, and Frank sings at least 3 different songs in it. And you also have Jack Haley, who was the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz, Michelle Morgan, Leon Errol, very, very funny role, and an extremely young, thin Mel Torme is in that movie. It was Frank Sinatra's first full role in a movie. He only had cameos or small parts up until 1943, and his character name is Frank Sinatra. It wasn't changed. Wow. So Frank Sinatra as Frank Sinatra, quite literally. And when Frank first appears in that movie, he comes up to a door of a house, knocks on the door, and a young lady from the inside opens the door. But he says, "Hello, I'm Frank Sinatra." And the girl just swoons because she's like a teenager, and this was right at the heart of the Bobby Soxers era. It's a charming, funny movie, very good music, written by Jimmy McHugh and lyrics by Harold Adamson. Superb songwriting team. So I strongly recommend that. But other musicals that Frank performed in, High Society, which also has Louis Armstrong, Bing Crosby, the 3 of them together for the only time in one film, and Grace Kelly. All the music by Cole Porter. One other one that I would strongly recommend is Guys and Dolls. And many people have said Frank didn't get the role that was better adapted for him. Frank played Nathan Detroit, but he probably should have been Sky Masterson in Guys and Dolls, which was the role that Marlon Brando got. And the rumor, and I'm sure it's true, is that Brando and Sinatra did not get along very well because Brando wanted to do take after take after take, and Frank wanted to be more spontaneous. And if he thought he gave his best on his first one, okay, let's keep moving ahead. So there's a little clash story that goes in there. It's one of the classics in American musicals, and even if you think Frank doesn't have the role that he should have had, go watch it. It's a lot of fun. And it's got all those bright colors in the clothing and all that throughout the whole movie. One thing for which Sinatra is quite well known is wearing a hat, and in a very, very stylish way. Of all his album covers, very few of them will show him without a hat. In fact, very few of them even show him in a singing pose. In other words, while he is singing. There's a book entitled The Way You Wear Your Hat, and that's the whole topic of that book in many, many different pictures. In my experience as a church organist, I met an older man in Norwalk. He said, "I worked in the clothing store, hat store around Midtown Manhattan for many years. Sinatra came for his hats there, as well as many other celebrities, Cary Grant and some others, the big shots from that time." And he mentioned that it was a Kavanaugh style hat. That's one other area where Frank made a contribution or an impression really into social history. And it is something for which he is quite well known. Frank is still there, quite frankly.